Retail data really isn't changing the way that we're thinking about advertising today. And that's probably the key point of that question that I would lean into. It's more so, it's really supportive and enabling the proof points and the things that we think about and have been advocating for years. And that's audience first planning and that's experience led planning. In that way, I see it as that the retail data is one of those clear points that really helps us understand the customer, and it's well beyond just attributes. It's the depth and texture of what they're doing, what they're buying, their journeys, their patterns. And it's really helping us inform the things that we'll do that are going to resonate most with them. And it's that level of granularity that empowers us to plan and activate experiences that are going to help us resonate with both advertisers and customers alike. So it's allowing for us to move more towards audience-led, experience-led, and moment-based engagement that is really the most important thing that retail data is doing for us.
And of course, loyalty and engagement plays a key role in retail media advertising. What does it take to balance the emotional brand building with measurable business outcomes?
Yeah, I love that one. Pragmatically, I think the balance is easy. It's the customer at the core, and if we're building strong connections with great work, we will see the outcomes come. What I oftentimes like to think about and say in these situations is it's typically the marketers or the business that get in the way of us finding that balance and brand versus outcomes. We make short-term decisions, we get uncomfortable, we operate in silos, and there's just an assortment of other things that really just impair us from being able to make that connection in a strong way. So I think it's more about us thinking about how do we get to alignment to effectively find that balance. And it's usually alignment and stronger usage of technology and data. It's getting to stronger organization alignment. It's figuring out what's the right measurement framework, that works for the organization. It's helping us think about what are the validated KPIs. And of course, to the previous question, is retail data that's often at the core of that, and the factors of how we think about creating that sustained balance.
And what about connecting with consumer behavior? It seems to be shifting a lot over the past several months with technology going through so many changes. How do you manage that?
Well, from a retail data perspective, as far as like unlocking, kind of, customer behavior, I think it's a really interesting question. And I think that the way we think about it is retail data is one of those things that's central to the way in which just data in general is trying to be kind of understood and simplified. And to that end, I think about it from we have anticipatory data and we oftentimes have responsive data. And that's where retail data is one of those signals that's available that really does both. And in that way, it's an anticipatory signal because it helps us understand what do we generally know about a customer and what do the retailers historically see and understand behaviorally. How does that customer act? But it's also responsive because oftentimes you can see it happening in real time and it's a real time signal. And so that's where retail data is kind of that, that inflection point, I guess, if you will, of where two of the different signals come together. And in terms of like how that helps us, continue to unlock and use, in real practical terms, I think that we oftentimes might plan against an audience and we expect that an audience is going to be one that we're going to show product X or we're going to deliver experience X. However, when we use retail data, we can start to get an understanding of like what the motivations and product interest are, and it might completely reshape the experience that we're going to show to any individual. It might reshape the product. It might reshape the way in which we might show a product bundle. And so just an assortment of different ways in which it might influence our messaging and influence our overall experience.
And shifting over to the content side of things, what role do you see retail data playing in connecting brand storytelling to actual sales impact?
Yeah. I see it's three things. I think retail data is an enabler, it's an enhancer, and it's an arbiter. And so, as far as an enabler, it really is that fusion between experience and commercial outcomes. So, retail data allows for us to be able to make decisions on how we're activating, so we understand where and how we reach somebody, and it helps us understand where and how that same individual might deliver to a specific outcome. So, in that way, it's an enabler, which I think it's most often the way in which we think about retail data. But I think it's an enhancer. And so when we think about, kind of the previous question and thinking about unlocks, it really helps us understand how we think about higher quality experiences. It helps us think about what are the things we're going to deliver that are going to make it more personal, more inspirational, so we can really use it as that up leveling and that enhancer in that storytelling journey. And then the arbiter piece is where, I think it really becomes interesting because it can provide that unlock for organizations. It's a validator. It can be that bridge between what and how are we investing in storytelling to how we're thinking about getting to outcomes. And so we think that bridge between emotional storytelling and transactional outcomes, it can be that thing that can help organizations move forward in understanding their investments and how it's working holistically for them.
Talk to me a little bit about what sort of advice you'd give to clients interested in digging into retail data to drive growth.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because retail media, retail data, it's one of those things where depending on what colleague you're talking to, what client you're talking to, it's the most mature category and it's stagnating. In other circles, people don't really even have a lot of awareness and understanding of how to use it. And so I like to think about it as, retail data itself and the data component is really, really nascent in the industry. Of course, endemic categories and retailers are using it at scale and in many different ways, but retail signals and permeating across the advertising complex in really unique and interesting ways is something there's a ton of opportunity, whether that's thinking about retail signals and how we get that into audience insights to put outcomes more prominently into the strategy. So moving retail data upstream into our planning and strategy processes and some of the tools is something that's a really interesting opportunity. Retail data into more holistic audience development to learn about how behaviors are intrinsically driving motivations and behaviors is something that I think we're doing in pockets, but I think we can continue to expand that just to give ourselves a more robust view of the customer, both endemically and non-endemically. And then I think retail data, as far as like how we're thinking about foresight and how we're thinking about forecasting and understanding predictions and the way in which it can be a real enabler to make a more robust decision about where we put investments, both retailers and beyond, gives us just a much broader swath of data that can be used more expansively than it is today as it continues to permeate deeper and deeper into the seams of the business.